I'm so excited today to introduce one of my dear friends, a colleague. She and I are both on the board for the National Association of Nutrition Professionals. And we also have a really deep love, appreciation for traditional food techniques, of course, natural practices. And as we were just discussing, making sure that we continue to hold on to information from times past and use that wisdom, to pass it on to next generations. And in the vein of doing so, it has been an absolute honor to be involved with a couple of books that this author, instructor, has shared with the world. They are absolute gifts. And so I really am so pleased to welcome Dr. Tammera Karr to Naturally Living Today. And Tammera, gosh, I want everyone to see this book. This is really what we're going to be talking about today. But there was a preview book to this. A preview is not quite right. It was absolutely an incredible book on its own right. I felt like what it was almost like the backstory to the Funky Kitchen of, the what, the why, the history of many of the traditional food preparation techniques and how we've grown up with food. It was our journey with food is what that was. And so this is what you've created now, which is the cookbook companion to that first incredible book. So Tammera, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarika. And, it's more than a cookbook, just like Our Journey with Food is not a history book. It was a wonderful review from one of our members at NANP said, I don't like history books, but I was stunned at this is like 5 books in one. So, in my intention for both of these books was we are in a position where in our industry, we have a lot of books available. They're consumer books, basically, for our students and for our practitioners. And we have to beg, borrow, and steal from other modalities to get books about our own practice of holistic nutrition. And so all along, my thought has been, we need somebody writing a textbook that is a holistic nutritionist for holistic nutritionists, using our language, our history. And so I'm a history geek. I love it. And you are the absolute queen of traditional foods. You really inspired me about fermenting. And that was why I thought when we did the fermenting chapter, you wrote the foreword for the second edition of Our Journey with Food. Thank you so much for that. And then when it came time to write about fermenting, I came to you because who knows it better than you? I mean, I went from being terrified of fermenting my own kombucha to having 6 gallons of the monster growing in my my room that I keep all of my canning jars and everything. And I have a slight reprieve. We left to go to Montana. And my house sitter was so overwhelmed with those 6 gallons of kombucha that I came home to having to start over, which is a little bit of a relief because I was thinking, how are we going to go through all of this kombucha? So your book from the Funky Kitchen and your insights that you shared with me made that transition of not doing our own fermented foods into having some of them so much easier. And so thank you for your contributions to this book. The Our Journey with Food Cookery Book, there's over 200 recipes in it, and some of them are modern recipes, but one of the things I have on the shelves behind me is a collection of antique cookbooks. The oldest one is it's the American European Cookery Book by a woman named Giselle, who I've quoted her in Our Journey with Food. And that one is from 1886. Then I have the White House Cookbook from 1891. And so I've got cookbooks from those dates all the way up to Dr. Terry Wall's cookbooks and your books on the shelves. And what really impressed me is how much information is not in cookbooks anymore. Now, granted, I don't need to know how to make my own pomade or my own whitewash for painting my house with, but there's a lack of information in these old cookbooks because it's obvious people had a lot more skills in the kitchen, in raising herbs, in combining things, so they didn't need all of the stuff that we put into cookbooks now. And it's also became very obvious of how much of our food preparation techniques are going away, that we've become so dependent on pop tops with cans that people don't understand how to use regular can openers. You have people who will, you know, where do I find these ingredients, and what do you do with broccoli or kohlrabi? And I remember reading a very on the NPR had a very poignant article done from a woman who's running food wagons. They're actually mobile farmers market trucks in Washington, D.C. And she had to incorporate cooking classes into providing all of this wonderful fresh produce because the people didn't know how to cook collard greens or what to do with kohlrabi or bok choy. So in order for us to bring our health back to where it's supposed to be, we have to go back to our roots, and we learn that through looking at the history and by preserving the history. And our students need to understand that traditional foods are not this diet or that diet, that traditional foods are those foods that are part of our culture, that they're harvested by hand, and they're prepared with intention. Because we're at that tipping point now in society where they are bringing more and more robots online to cook our food. It's a big movement in the Asian countries to replace the chefs with robots. And Hildegard von Bingen did some fabulous writing in the 11th century about the power of intention that goes into our food and that is in our food when we harvest it. From the time we plant that seed through the time we consume it, that energy, the quantum physics of it, and how it impacts us. So all of that's being lost because no one is writing about it anymore. And our holistic nutritionists that are coming up behind us, the next generation, if you and I don't share that information with our clients and with these individuals, we're going to have people who have no idea what real traditional foods are, how it creates biodiversity, how it affects us on the DNA, and keeps DNA from being activated. And we're looking at a tidal wave of Alzheimer's and dementia coming up with the baby boomer population. And it's so clear to me when I look back at the history of these populations, the things that took place uniquely with this population that had never occurred before. And now, you know, Liz Lipsky said it takes 4 generations to damage DNA and 4 generations to heal DNA. We are at 4 and 5 generations now of people living on processed foods, and our health of our country shows it. It just hugely shows it.
It does. And that to me is the absolute value of what you brought in the first book, the second edition of the first book. And obviously with the actual tactical skills of bringing the cookbook forth. We do need someone to hold the hand of the practitioner, of the client in the kitchen, and give that direction, because just as you say, in many families, it really is something that is 4 to 5 generations deep of processed food consumption. And of course, the cellular damage that arises from that. And then of course, the diseases that come as a result of that. But just as you say, this psychological component and the physical activity of knowing how to relate to your food, knowing what something smells like as it's at a certain stage of okay, we stop this part and we move into the next phase of cooking. What it, you know, the scent, the sound, the taste, of course, you know, what we visualize as we move into different stages of food preparation. And that is something that is incredibly impactful. And I love that this book shines such a bright and loving light on that to help support people through that process.
Well, and we've also reached a point in society, and at least wise in American society, where we downplay the importance of food and of preparation of food, that you're either a world famous chef that sparkles, or it's viewed as a demeaning practice. And when we look at the history of things, the good wife, the housewife, her whole community that was dependent on her skills, they depended on her knowledge of herbs, her knowledge of preservation of foods, of how to grow things, how to keep things in an orderly fashion. The good wife became, and now the housewife, those were roles of society that were highly esteemed because of the skills that were involved to be that. Now when you call somebody a housewife, they feel like they have to apologize for it, instead of being proud of the fact that it takes a lot of energy, a lot of skill, a lot of know-how, and being able to juggle multifaceted hats to play that role, to keep the garden growing, the kids somewhat clean and orderly. We look at that in society right now as something that's bad, and I think that explains part of why our society's in the mess that it is we've put importance on other aspects. And for women who are career women, they are under tremendous pressure to try and juggle the traditional hat and the professional hat, because they have to apologize for the traditional.
Yeah.
And that's really sad to me that we have to do that.
Yeah, in the end, when we look at what happened around the culture in our country, really in the 70s, began in the 50s with the advent of working with, more technology in the kitchen and throughout the home. But it really is sad that everything was kind of put to a lower level, to look after the home, and then you would hire someone to do it. And now, of course, we hire someone to prepare meals for us and have them delivered to our door. And ship them to us. We don't even need to leave the house. So there's, and it's an interesting thing. There was some research that was done with women in the 1950s at that turn of beginning to bring in more technology, more prepared foods, more ease on the housewife. And the research revealed that the women were very happy about having a washing machine and an iron that could plug into the wall, these sorts of things. Yes, all good. But the one thing that they said on balance that they really didn't want taken away was the creativity around cooking. That was their place where they really felt an expression of themselves. That's how I read it. But, the research results showed when it comes to cooking, kind of leave that bit alone. Somehow, things moved in a different direction than that. And I love that your books help us to see the power on so many other levels of what these activities around cooking can do for us. So I love that.
Yeah, a little story to share with you before we wrap up is one of our colleagues, she is from Middle Eastern descent, and we were talking about stuff, and I said, it's all the Muslims' fault that we have this huge addiction to sugar. And she said, oh, great, from terrorism to sugar, aren't we just a lovely people? And I said, no, stop right there. Let's shine on all of the wonderful things the Muslims have brought to flavor of food. If it were not for those intrepid travelers who did the caravans that brought sugar from India, who brought the cardamom, the allspice, the clove, all of these flavors, peaches, cherries, that brought all of that into Europe and how to cook it, think of how boring our food would be without that amazing food culture.
Yeah.
And so that's where traditional foods too, we can throw all of the politics away,
Mhm.
and we can remember how grandmother loved us through the smells. An Italian woman told me that once I talked with her about mashing garlic and letting it set for a little bit before applying it into whatever she was cooking, she said, "Oh my God, now my kitchen smells like my grandmother's. I didn't know how my grandmother's kitchen always smelled this
That's
way. And
wonderful.
now my kitchen smells like her kitchen."
Oh, that
So,
is the
you
best.
know, this opportunity for us to feel empowered and proud and excited about
Exactly.
what we have to offer because of traditional foods. It's
Oh,
just,
I love that. It's powerful, Tamara. And I love, it's little things like that, the garlic thing. I mean, that's so great. That's so great. Here at my house, I'm about to have one of my patients come, and I feel proud that my house smells like homemade sourdough bread.
oh, it's
That's going to
wonderful.
be a warm welcome to her. And it's what the kids are going to come home to at the end of the day, is smelling that. It inspires a sense of place and a sense of safety. And so,
Yeah.
and I think we could use more of that.
Yeah, and we don't need the candles that smell like Christmas spices. We need to just cook with them so that we have the real sense. Those people who are into aromatherapy understand how brain chemistry and biological stuff has changed through the smell of these herbs. The same thing is happening when we show people how to use them in the cooking. It's the taste, how it's transported, how we can turn something that has okay nutrition quality into being dynamite nutrition quality because of the synergistic combination of these herbs with the proteins and the
Yeah.
fats and the carbohydrates that release the carotenoids and everything else.
Oh, it's
So
powerful. It is. It's a stacking that happens. And this book, the cookery book, and of course again the backstory of our journey with food, both of these really reveal so much. And I just want to say, even if a person isn't a student of holistic nutrition, these books are so enjoyable to read, and the sort of information that just a quick Google search on making a sauce or something is not going to reveal the love, some of the steps that are found in the recipes in your books. So that to me alone is a reason to step into, making these part of your library that you work with. They're just so unique. I love these books. There are very few books that I will want to read on digital format. And I actually read Our Journey with Food, and despite the fact that it was digital, I loved it. I couldn't put it down.
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's the thing about, my publisher said to me, "Oh, thank goodness you didn't write this in a standard textbook mode because they're so boring."
They
And
are.
how we learn is because we get excited about the information. And those little tidbits of information that you throw in that make you an excellent Trivia Pursuit player, because that doesn't hurt any. But we there's just so much about food that connects us to the past and to the present. Excuse me. And if we don't change what we're doing with our food in this country, we don't have a future, because preconception nutrition is what's going to make or break the children that come next.
That's the truth. Otherwise, you're really doing a lot of legwork to try and clean up the mess after the fact. And it can absolutely have a positive impact. Of course, the epigenetic studies show us that. But golly, to just get good nutrition into, parents before, they have a baby, and, what they do with that is some phenomenal stuff. So I love that. Yes, you're right. Excellent books to share with the young people who are, yet to have children. But boy, once you do
And
have
if we
them,
expect them to read it, it's got to be entertaining.
and it does.
So,
And the books, really, both of them are very entertaining. I love the way that you put in history with modern research. Everything kind of weaves together really beautifully. It's awesome.
thank you.
Thank you, Tammera. Well, thank you so much also for taking the time to share a bit about this. And so where can people find your books?
Both of the books are available through Amazon.com. If you want the digital versions, you go to my website, yourwholenutrition.com. We decided not to do them in Kindle or other formats through those outlets because they just looked awful.
Right.
And there's so much love went into these that we wanted the digital readers to be able to have the full color experience that we intended. So the digital versions are available through my website, yourwholenutrition.com. All of the print versions are available through Amazon.com, and they are listed as Prime right now. So,
Wonderful.
and please leave your reviews. Sarika, go write a review.
I know.
The reviews
I
that
haven't
you write
yet.
on
Of all
Amazon.
people.
Yeah, the reviews are very important for the placement, and so we have both of these books now are in 4 of our nutrition schools, and so our students get special discounts if they contact us.
Excellent. That is so good. Well, Tammera, thank you again. So happy to have you here. You take care. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year, Sarika.